Hey, welcome back to the library. In today's first foray into a new Game-Rave TV series, the What If segments will offer alternate timelines and concepts to what actually happened here on Earth 1. To kick things off, I wanted to go back to a defining moment in the PlayStation's timeline that affected 3 different companies all at once: Sony's licensing of SNK games. Now, like all things in the industry, there were multiple timelines happening across all 3 regions of the gaming world, so to keep things super simple, I'm going to strictly focus on the American sequence of events for this episode. If you're new to Game-Rave TV, I actually covered this moment in question back in episode 123, so be sure to check that out for a video refresher. We'll start at the scenario already discussed. Sony of America gets an exclusive US license for SNK's King of Fighters 95 and Samurai Shodown 3 Blades of Blood by late 1996. By publishing the games, they denied the chance for the much better ports and cart-assisted versions that lived on the Japanese Saturn. It was one of the final nails in the American Saturn's coffin, and one of the coolest, if most devious moves Sony would ever pull off. But then, something happened. Sony of America never followed through on the final step. Despite spending advertising money on retail store promotional videos and even ads on the back of instruction manuals, Fatal Fury Real Bout would be left unpublished in America. Content with the last fatal blow, if you'll pardon the pun, to the Saturn, Sony would simply move on from the situation. Meanwhile, SNK was having a rough go as a company in general. Realizing the NeoGeo MVS hardware was starting to show its age in an ever-growing 3D world, they were developing its 3D replacement in the Hyper NeoGeo 64 hardware. Slightly delayed amid a private development cycle, when the 64 made its debut, it was a mess. Graphically, it was already clear that it wasn't up to snuff with the existing 3D rivals like Namco's Soul Edge. Even their flagship Fatal Fury series looked inferior to its contemporaries. Worse still, the elegance of the MVS hardware was completely trashed for a confusing hardware decision. With the MVS, you could have one single motherboard and swap out games like a home console. Multi-slot versions provided arcade owners with cheaper ways of bringing in new games. The Hyper NeoGeo 64 didn't have a single motherboard. That changed based on the genre being developed. A total of 4 motherboards covering fighting, racing, and 2 other examples would be needed, causing confusion and unnecessary multiple purchases for arcade owners. SNK's design flaw, along with the inferior tech behind it, would be a huge disaster. Amassing only 7 games in its library, none of which met the accolades of its MVS predecessors, the Hyper NeoGeo 64 series quietly retired in 1999. On the console front, SNK's American release schedule would only consist of the port for the Hyper 64's Fatal Fury Wild Ambition, the original Kudelka, and a somewhat sort of sequel remix to the 64 Samurai Shodown. It would later be left to H-Tech to bring 2 more of SNK's games to the US, and then silence after that. Other ventures like the NeoGeo Pocket just couldn't keep up with its Nintendo rivals. Sadly, the American offices of SNK would close in 2000, and the rest would be left to historians to discuss. Unless Sony buys SNK instead. This is obviously a stretch considering how anti-2D the US PlayStation management was at the time, but in hindsight, it would have been a genius move. Let's start back in 1995 when SNK is developing the 64 hardware. It's clear they're struggling and lost their way. Sony, keeping an eye on Saturn publishers and discovering the ROM and RAM cards could provide something PlayStation couldn't. That is, unless the problem is attacked from a different angle. With Sony and Namco working together on the System 11 board, which is practically the arcade version of the PlayStation, Sony would have had the perfect playground for SNK. The house that Fatal Fury built has proven how much they can squeeze out of old hardware, and the System 11 board would have been perfect fit for them. Since SNK would now be working on PlayStation hardware in their native arcade environment, they'd have been able to use that knowledge to keep improving their home console ports, now exclusive to Sony. Second, they could bring over one of the coolest features of the MVS to the System 11 boards: cross-compatible memory card usage. With the NeoGeo, you could use the same memory card and save data between the home console and the properly equipped arcade machines. This concept isn't far-fetched. Certain versions of Konami's Dance Dance Revolution machines already had PlayStation 1 memory card slots, and Midway's Blitz machines had N64 memory card readers. This dynamic, while not earth-shaking, would be enough to put the Pocket Station back on the US map and allow developers to keep the features in for their Western releases, including, but not limited to, Street Fighter Alpha 3, Hot Shots Golf 2, and more. More importantly, it would have given Sony a foot in the door of arcade classic games. Granted, the genre of arcade compilations was more prevalent in Japan, but there were more than enough in America to justify the push. SNK's NeoGeo backlog would have provided a fantastic budget release library to keep up with the Namco Museum series and the like. This includes compilations of their sports games, beat-em-ups, and shooters. Larger games would have gotten their own releases. In my wildest fanboy dreams, it might have also meant that the Western gaming scene could have finally gotten a translated version of Samurai Shodown RPG, just on PlayStation, not Neo CD. In a strange turn of events, the buyout keeps rival arcade publishers on their toes. Capcom realizes that there's more to life than Street Fighter. With the Saturn failing, Capcom begins porting Cyberbots, the once Saturn exclusive Night Warriors, and many of the older CPS games like Alien vs. Predator to the PlayStation. With a firm foundation of ports to the PlayStation and SNK pushing the System 11 board to its max, this would have given SNK a better understanding of the 3D future and opened them up to a broader development cycle. In the real timeline, Kudelka was the oddity, but here in the What If universe, it's the beginning of endless possibilities. There could have been expansions into the Athena universe, new multiplayer 3D takes on Robo Army, Magician Lord, Top Hunter, and more. From there, SNK finally transitions from their arcade roots into a fully focused console developer with the arrival of the PlayStation 2. Sony, now seeing the errors of their earlier anti-2D stance, work with the SNK team to develop a special 2D-focused chipset for the PlayStation 2 hardware. It ends up allowing more publishers to continue bringing classic arcade games to the system alongside the backwards compatibility ones. It also brings the indie revolution home a decade early, as smaller developers have an easier category to develop from. If only. In the real world, SNK went through some crazy hoops to keep themselves around and relevant. While they're still actively publishing games and branching out into modern trends, it's a shame they don't try to branch out more, relying way too heavily on King of Fighters and Samurai Shodown to keep them afloat. And that's the episode, guys. So what'd you think? Is the what if concept worth revisiting? Let me know in the comments below and we can start the discussion. If you could change one moment in gaming history, no matter the system, the game, or the event, what would it be? Everything is in play. Be safe, have a safe week, get vaccinated, and I'll see you on the other side. Take care, guys. Have a good one.